What looks like politics, and imagines itself to be political, will one day unmask itself as a religious movement. Faith is a marvel, and yet no human being is excluded from it, for that in which all human life is united is passion, and faith is a passion. My melancholy is the most faithful sweetheart I have had. Now, with God's help, I shall become myself. I begin with the principle that all men are bores. Surely no one will prove himself so great a bore as to contradict me in this. It was completely fruitless to quarrel with the world, whereas the quarrel with oneself was occasionally fruitful and always, she had to admit, interesting. The man prayed, and at first he thought that prayer was talking, but he became more and more quiet until in the end he realized prayer is listening. Death cannot explain itself. The earnestness consists precisely in this, that the observer must explain it to himself. The person who praises God is on the tracks of justice. I would rather be a swineherd, understood by the swine, than a poet misunderstood by men. Nothing is as heady as the wine of possibility. Why I so much prefer autumn to spring is that in the autumn one looks at heaven, in the spring at the earth. I must find a truth that is true for me. God creates out of nothing. Wonderful, you say? Yes, to be sure, but he does what is still more wonderful. He makes saints out of sinners. Only the noble of heart are called to difficulty. Every day I walk myself into a state of well-being and walk away from every illness. I have walked myself into my best thoughts. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. Life has its own hidden forces, which you can only discover by living. I found I had less and less to say, until finally, I became silent, and began to listen. I discovered in the silence, the voice of God. If I am capable of grasping God objectively, I do not believe, but precisely because I cannot do this I must believe. You become what you understand. Repetition is the reality and the seriousness of life. The unhappy person is never present to themselves because they always live in the past or the future. Where am I? Who am I? How did I come to be here? What is this thing called the world? To venture causes anxiety. Not to venture is to lose oneself. Many of us pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that we hurry past it. Personality is only ripe when a man has made the truth his own. It is more blessed to give than to receive. But then it is also more blessed to be able to do without than to have to have. Intelligence has got the upper hand to such an extent that it transforms the real task into an unreal trick and reality into a play. If I could prescribe only one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, I would prescribe silence. Christianity demands the crucifixion of the intellect. The task must be made difficult, for only the difficult inspires the noble-hearted. Dread is a sympathetic antipathy and an antipathetic sympathy. It is so hard to believe because it is so hard to obey. There can be no faith without risk. Faith is holding on to uncertainties with passionate conviction. The best news the world has ever heard came from a graveyard. Christ is risen, prayer is listening. Adversity not only draws people together, but brings forth that beautiful inward friendship. The thinker without a paradox is like a lover without a feeling, a paltry mediocrity. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. For he who loves God without faith reflects on himself, while the person who loves God in faith reflects on God. The deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than himself. It is very important in life to know when your cue comes. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever.